In 1933, a man was democratically elected to lead one of the most educated, culturally advanced nations in the world. A country of philosophers, scientists, engineers, and artists. A country that had produced Beethoven, Einstein, Goethe, and Freud. Within 6 years, that same population was cheering for mass murder in public squares. Not because they were stupid. Not because they were uniquely evil. But because a specific psychological architecture had been deliberately constructed around them. Brick by brick. Until the unthinkable felt not just acceptable, but necessary. This video isn't about one man, one country, or one moment in history. It's about the playbook. The same playbook that has been used, and is still being used, wherever concentrated power seeks total control. Authoritarianism doesn't arrive as an obvious monster. It arrives as a solution. It speaks the language of safety, pride, and restoration. It identifies enemies precisely calibrated to the fears of the moment. And it systematically dismantles every cognitive defense a population has, using psychology, not just force. What you're about to hear isn't theory. It's documented, studied, peer-reviewed. And once you see the pattern, you will recognize it everywhere. Every authoritarian consolidation of power in recorded history begins with the same first move. Crisis. Real, exaggerated, or entirely manufactured, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the population feels under existential threat. Because fear does something specific to human cognition. It narrows thinking. It collapses the future into the immediate present. It makes people willing to trade long-term freedoms for short-term safety. The political scientist Naomi Wolf documented this in her 2007 work on the 10 steps common to the closure of open societies. Step 1 is always the same. Invoke an internal or external threat so severe that emergency measures feel not just justified, but demanded by the public itself. The Reichstag fire. The eternal enemy. The invisible infiltrator. The specific threat changes. The psychological function is identical. Once fear is established, it needs a target. This is where scapegoating becomes a precision instrument. The target group must be visible enough to identify, vulnerable enough not to effectively fight back, and connected, however loosely, to the fears already activated. The psychology here draws directly from Henri Teifel's social identity theory. Humans categorize themselves into in-groups and out-groups automatically. It's a cognitive shortcut that evolved for tribal survival. Authoritarians don't create this tendency. They weaponize it. They amplify the boundaries between groups. They assign collective guilt. They make the out-group responsible for every grievance the in-group carries. And crucially, they make attacking the out-group feel like self-defense. Not aggression. Protection. Not cruelty. Necessity. The third move is the most technically sophisticated. Control the information environment. Not by eliminating all alternative information, that's inefficient and creates martyrs. But by flooding the zone. Overwhelm the population with so many competing narratives, contradictory claims, and manufactured controversies that distinguishing truth from fiction becomes exhausting. Steve Bannon, whatever your political view of him, described this strategy explicitly in a 2018 interview. Flood the zone with shit, he said. The goal isn't to make people believe a specific lie. The goal is to make people stop believing anything is knowable. When truth feels inaccessible, people default to tribal identity. They believe what their group believes. And the group believes what the leader says. Hannah Arendt identified this in 1951 in The Origins of Totalitarianism. The goal of propaganda isn't to persuade. It's to produce a population incapable of distinguishing between fact and fiction. A population in that state doesn't need to be controlled by force. It controls itself. Alongside information control comes the construction of the leader as symbol. Not as a politician, as an embodiment. Of the nation. Of strength. Of historical destiny. Gustave Le Bon wrote about this in 1895 in The Crowd, a study of the popular mind. Crowds don't follow logic. They follow images. Symbols. Emotional associations. The feeling of being part of something larger than yourself. The authoritarian leader becomes the projection screen for collective hope and collective rage simultaneously. Criticism of the leader becomes blasphemy. Not because laws enforce it initially, but because followers enforce it socially. Loyalty signaling becomes currency. The louder your devotion, the safer you are. The quieter your dissent, the more dangerous your position. This creates a self-reinforcing spiral. Public consensus forms not because people agree, but because disagreement carries too high a social cost. Preference falsification, the gap between private belief and public expression, spreads until an entire population is performing a reality none of them privately believe. The fifth move targets the structures designed to prevent concentrated power. independent judiciary, free press, academic institutions, civil society organizations. These are attacked not all at once, that would trigger unified resistance. They are attacked sequentially, incrementally. Each attack framed as a correction of bias, corruption, or elite capture. Each individual step seems defensible in isolation. It's only in sequence that the pattern becomes visible. And by the time the pattern is visible, the institutions capable of resisting it have already been hollowed out. This is what political scientists call democratic backsliding. Hungary under Orbán is the most documented contemporary case study. A fully functioning EU democracy systematically dismantled over a decade, not through a coup, but through legislation, each law individually passable. Collectively, the architecture of soft authoritarianism. The sixth and most psychologically sophisticated move forces the population to participate. Active participation in the system, even symbolic participation, creates psychological ownership. If you attended the rally, you endorsed the rally. If you repeated the slogan, you chose the slogan. If you stayed silent while your neighbor was taken, you made a choice. Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance theory explains what happens next. When behavior conflicts with values, the brain doesn't change the behavior. It rewrites the values. It constructs a justification for what it already did. Mass participation in authoritarian systems isn't just about control. It's about making the population complicit. Because complicit populations don't revolt. They double down. They need the system to be right, because if it isn't, they have to face what they did. Hannah Arendt covered the trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem in 1961. She expected a monster. She found a bureaucrat. A man who insisted he was just following orders. Just doing his job. Just processing paperwork. She coined the phrase that has haunted political philosophy ever since, the banality of evil. Her conclusion was devastating. The greatest atrocities in history are not committed by psychopaths who enjoy suffering. They are committed by ordinary people who have been given a system that normalizes participation, who have been given permission, social, legal, ideological permission, to stop thinking of certain other humans as fully human. The psychology isn't exceptional. It's ordinary, and that is the most frightening finding in the entire literature. It would be comfortable to frame everything in this video as history. As something that happened. Past tense. Resolved. It isn't. The same psychological mechanics documented by Arendt, Milgram, Teifel, Laban, and Lifton are observable in real time in multiple countries today. The specific targets change. The specific leaders change. The playbook does not. Manufactured crisis. Scapegoat. Information flood. Personality cult. Institutional dismantling. Forced participation. 6 moves. Every time. In different costumes. With different rhetoric. At different speeds. But the same architecture underneath. So what does resistance actually look like? Not heroism. Not dramatic confrontation. The most effective resistance documented in the historical literature is quieter. Maintain relationships across group boundaries. They're the first thing authoritarian systems try to sever. Consume information from multiple conflicting sources, not to achieve perfect truth, but to resist capture by any single narrative. Name the tactics when you see them, publicly, specifically, without hysteria. Support institutional independence, judiciary, press, academia, before the crisis, not during it, because during the crisis, it's already too late. And critically, be aware of your own tribal cognition. The scapegoating mechanism works because it feels like justice. The cult of personality works because it feels like hope. The information flood works because certainty is exhausting to maintain. Awareness doesn't make you immune, but it creates friction. And in a system that runs on smooth, frictionless compliance, friction is everything. The populations that lived through the 20th century's authoritarian catastrophes weren't different from it. They were educated. They were cultured. They loved their children. They just didn't see the architecture being built around them until they were inside. And once you're inside it, the walls feel like safety. That's the final, darkest trick. The cage is designed to feel like home. Psycho Veil. The manual they never wanted you to have. Subscribe. Share this with someone still asleep. Next episode, we go inside the crypto market. The psychology of mass financial manipulation, and why the same tricks that built cults, built billion-dollar coins out of nothing. You've been warned.